Hi, everyone. Looks like we got some people jumping on. Hey, guys.
Quite a few people coming on.
Yeah, some familiar names. Awesome. Maybe I'll give it just a few more seconds just to let people jump on.
I see Coach Connor. Hi, Connor.
And I think I see Elisa.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So just to introduce myself, my name is Carly. I'm one of the performance dietitians over at Santa Clara in San Jose in California. Today we also have two other dietitians. So we have Tess, who's over in Oregon working with the Jones Farm and Hawthorne sites. And then we have Allison, our other dietitian in California. She works with the Folsom site. So welcome everybody to our Ask the Dietitian series. This is our second one of this new year. And before we jump into our topic for this week or today, we just want to recap a little bit on the last session. So 2 weeks ago, we had a session on why do weight loss efforts fail? And we talked about a few things. So maybe you're setting a unrealistic goal. Maybe you have a lack of motivation because you might not know your true why of why you're wanting to lose weight. Or maybe your diet is just a little bit too restrictive. So we talked about all those things. And then we gave you 3 challenges to choose from. So now we just want to hear, if you chose a challenge or maybe you did all 3, we just want you to share. So the first one is, did anyone set a goal for 2021, a new goal? And something that is, it can be specific. So we talked about SMART goals, how those are more specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So if you did set a SMART goal, or just any goal, go ahead and put it over in the chat box. So for example, my goal, well, one of my SMART goals for this year, I have a hard time with drinking enough water, especially when it's cold. So one of mine was I will drink at least 80 ounces of water each day. So that's just one of mine. I don't know if Allison or Tess, if you have any goals.
Yeah. Mine's just to stay active as much as possible, Carly. I know it's hard
Yeah,
because we're all sitting at our desks and even if I can get out for a walk or something, that's a positive. So
definitely. Yeah. Anyone else? No one set a goal for this year? I know you guys have some goals. So we'd love for you to share them over in the chat box. Or, if you didn't set a brand new goal, if you revamped your old 2020 goal for sort of like a new goal for this year. So anyone wants to share, that would be awesome. And guys, we do encourage you to put questions and put comments in the chat box because it really makes it more fun and interesting, more interaction throughout the webinar. Let's see, we have somebody, Ari, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm calorie counting and trying to have a balanced diet. Awesome. That's a really good one. Richard, my goals are around fitness, health, weight loss for June 1st. Also looking to do 3 backpacking trips this year. That's really cool. That's an
yeah.
awesome one. Cool. Well, if anyone else wants to share, feel free to put them in the chat box. Our third challenge for you was, did you schedule a one-on-one nutrition consultation for this year? So whether you scheduled one or maybe you already had one for this year, just put like a yes or no in the chat box. We just want to know, if you guys are scheduling nutrition consultations. Let's see, Gail has a goal, get 20 grams of fiber. Awesome. Sarah drinking more water.
Yeah,
Mohammed,
similar with Allison.
Yeah, nice, you
Yeah,
guys. I know
nice.
I've talked to a few of you guys already, and I'm going to talk to a couple of them next week, maybe, or the week following. But yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, we got some. So not yet. Yeah, and it's okay if you didn't schedule yet. If you want to schedule, just shoot us an email or an IM and we can set you up for a consultation. But yeah, all really great goals. Awesome. Thank you. So now we're going to get into our topic for this week, and it's a good one. So we're going to be talking about how do I estimate my energy needs or calorie needs? Do calories count? And do wearables, so things like your Apple Watch, Garmin, Fitbit, do they accurately calculate calories burned? So we're going to be talking about all those things. But first, before we really get into it, we have a little thought starter. So, thought starter, you just did a 45-minute metabolic challenge class, and your Apple Watch or Fitbit says you burned 500 calories. Do you think this is accurate? So, go ahead, put your answers in the chat box. What do you think? All right, we're getting some no's. Nope. No. Okay, we got some yeses. Awesome. So getting a mix of answers, and you will hear Tess probably answer this question. Yeah, so Tess, do our wearables accurately measure calories burned?
Likely not. So, and there was a study of about 7 different fitness trackers and from Stanford University fairly recently. The most accurate, so they compared it to the gold standard. So in other words, kind of one of the gold standards for energy expenditure during an exercise might be this unit that they put on you, and they're measuring your carbon dioxide output. And then they're also measuring your heart rate. And you're going to get a pretty accurate picture. So they compared what those different devices reported versus what they found with their gold standard. They found in terms of heart rate that it was fairly accurate, although when I compare my heart rate on my Apple Watch, which I lost in a bike accident and have it replaced, I'm living free now, and comparing that to so for me, the heart rate monitor never really seemed to be as good. The strap was typically, I think, more accurate in my case. But they in their study, which wasn't huge, 60 people, found that for heart rate, fairly accurate. And however, for energy expenditure during that event, no. The worst one was off by 93%. I really didn't read mathematically how that worked, but the most accurate was off by about 27%. So probably no.
Yep. Thanks,
We can
Tess.
talk
Yeah.
more about the implications later in this that I'm wanting to jump into, but I'm going to hold.
Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, the short answer is no, but it doesn't mean that these, wearables are completely useless. They're good for just like hitting the same goal each day. So I know for me, like I have an Apple Watch and I like to close all the little rings. So I'm not focusing so much on the calories, but more of just hitting that goal each day and staying consistent. I don't know about you guys, Tess or Allison, if you well, Tess, you mentioned you have um, the Apple Watch or the
Me?
Fitbit. Yes,
I had the Apple Watch.
the Apple Watch. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Somebody's asking for the link. This is a write-up
let's see.
from Stanford, and then you can dig up deeper into the actual. So I'm
Mm,
putting that in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Tess. Um, Yeah, so Allison, okay, we know that the wearables don't really accurately measure calories burned, but how do we accurately estimate our energy needs or calorie needs?
yeah, that's a great question, Carly, and I'm sure that everybody is wondering that, right? If we can't use our watches, what can we use? And there's a couple different answers here. So the first answer that I'd say is come to one of us, come to your registered dietitian, and we can help you measure these things. So primarily we would use an equation, not unlike the one you see on the screen here. And we would factor in a number of different things. We would factor in your age, your gender, your weight, your height, and your activity level, sometimes even your body fat percentage if we have access to that information. So all of these things are variables that, you know, make you you and make your calorie needs your own. They're all individualized. So it is important to calculate it specifically for each individual. That said, even sometimes these equations are not the most accurate. So they can be off by 100 to 200 calories, depending on the person, depending on the situation. So like Tess said, there are machines like in the medical setting where you can get a little bit more of an accurate measure here. But this is kind of the most accurate that we have right now. One of the equations that we use most often is called Mifflin-St. Jeor, and that's something that we can plug all of your information in and just generate an answer. What's important to realize is that we are factoring all of these variables in, but especially your activity level is already factored into this equation. So what I hear from a lot of people sometimes is that I give them a calorie amount. Let's say it's 2,000 calories. And then they go for a run and let's say they burn 200 calories on that run, right? And then they want to eat those 200 calories back, right? So, oh, I went for a run, I burned 200 calories. I can eat 200 calories more of cake today, right? It doesn't really work like that because we've already factored your activity level in. And so you don't really get to add those calories back on to the equation, unfortunately. The only exception there is if you do a lot more activity, you know, than you're normally used to, like you run a marathon someday, and then you would need a lot more calories on that day. You would want to add that in because it's a lot higher than your normal baseline activity level. So those are a couple considerations with how to calculate your calorie needs. But first things first, I would come to your registered dietitian, namely one of us, shoot us an email. We can always help you calculate these things.
Thanks, Allison. That's a good point. Yeah, shoot us an email or an IM if you want to set something up. And we know that, you know, it is important to calculate your estimated energy needs, especially if your goal is weight loss. And we know for weight loss that we have to be in a calorie deficit. And what that means is we need to be eating less calories than we're burning. Or if you want to think about it, you need to be burning more calories than you're eating. So some kind of calorie deficit. But the question is, Tess, is how much of a calorie deficit do we need to be in for weight loss?
Right. So we do need to create what we might think of as a meaningful calorie deficit. That's somewhere between 200 and 500 calories per day. And so a lot of times what I experience is that people might do that Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday. We're really good at being at that calorie restriction. Really that caloric deficit really needs to be seen not on a daily basis, but over the course of the time. Like, let's say I have one big meal. Is that going to ruin any weight loss efforts? Not necessarily, because we don't know what's happening at a meal later in the day or later in the week. So almost to kind of think of this over the long term. So we have this great slide up that I love. And I had an experience with somebody that was one of the clients was really good tracking Monday through Friday. And it took a good while for me to convince this person, like, hey, let's track over the weekend. And so then the funny part of that was after that, she comes back, she goes, oh, I didn't realize. Because we might create this great deficit Monday through Thursday. And if we create too big of a deficit, that almost backfires and we end up overeating because we've overly restricted. So I always kind of say, hey, let's start with maybe a 300 deficit, see if that can elicit over time. And maybe it will help the weekends where we're not feeling overly hungry or so on and so forth. But we really can kind of lose our deficit if we're not careful to do that over a course of time versus just one day or 4 days. And then the other days we've basically evened out and we're more truly on average a maintenance versus a deficit.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tess. And this is a really good slide. And I don't know about you guys, but I try to, I know my weekends are going to be maybe higher calories, or I'm going to have takeout or maybe some wine. So I think about my week ahead of time and sort of plan for that. So maybe I'm eating, a lot better foods during the week, and then I can kind of plan ahead and know that I might have, something like takeout or wine or something on the weekend. Tess and Allison, is this something that you sort of think about too?
Well, we do have a question in the chat box that I'd
Oh
like to
yeah, let's
respond
see.
to. So somebody's asking, what happens if you do a 1,000 calorie deficit and you say that you do that for a month? Shouldn't mathematically it help lose 8 pounds a month, assuming no exercise? You know, potentially, I say, yeah, but if you're going to do that for a 1,000 calorie deficit is a pretty big deficit. And metabolically, there might be things that are happening that we could be losing a lot of weight very quickly with that kind of deficit. And we still need, one thing that we looked at in that slide before was this thing called BMR, right? That's your basal metabolic rate. That's the amount of calories you would need to maintain your size while lying in bed rest, okay? Or even more, is even lower than that is like doing nothing. So if we're not meeting that BMR, these are basic metabolic processes of breathing, of enzyme creation, antibodies, blah, 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 enzymes, all these things. Now, if we're not meeting our caloric need, we're likely not meeting that protein need. And we're going to maybe lose weight really quickly, but part of that is the body tearing down not just your fat, but likely a lot of your lean body mass to be able to make the enzymes, to make the antibodies. So that kind of restriction for that long might really cause a lot more rebounding, and you might be losing some of your lean body mass. And when that happens, maybe you're less active too. And then, so again, to that question is like, sure, you might lose 8 pounds pretty quickly, but it's not all fat. And
Yeah.
I haven't had many people that come in and say, I really like to lose lean body mass.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
No, no.
But we all want to lose fat. If we want to lose weight,
Yeah.
it's not really, or I've had people very specific of like, I don't really want to lose weight. I just want to lose fat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tess, another thing with that is that you might get very, very hungry in that period. 1,000 calories, that's a lot. I mean, for someone on a 2,000 calorie diet, that's half their needs. So you're likely to get through that deficit period and then get so hungry that you'll overeat and have kind of this weekend sabotage period going on, like we see on the slide here. So it doesn't always even out in the end, and you're likely to maybe gain that weight back pretty quickly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the question now is the only way to lose fat fast is a lot of exercise and then caloric intake. Unfortunately, losing fat fast is pretty difficult. And there's potentially 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. So ultimately, I think it's best when we want long-term weight loss, that it's going to be a decent reduction in calories, and moderate amounts of exercise can help, or activity. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, those are good points. And just to, I guess, Joanna, this kind of leads us, your question leads us into what we want to talk about next. Could you reiterate the healthy ways to lose weight, not just counting calories? So yeah, Allison, should we only focus on calories?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Joanna. And the answer is a little bit of both. So yes, calories, we need to focus on them sometimes. Like Tess was just saying, we do need a little bit of a deficit to lose weight, but that doesn't have to come through focusing very intensely on calories themselves. It can come through just incorporating healthy practices like diet and exercise. And one thing that I like to think about and tell my clients to think about is the mindful eating portion of this. So if you're a little bit mindful of how you're feeling, are you hungry? Are you full? How much exercise have you been doing? then you'll be a little bit more in tune with your body, and you'll be able to tell, oh, I did a little bit extra exercise today. I'm feeling a little bit more hungry. Maybe I should eat an extra snack today, something like along those lines. Or like we talked about with the marathon, you run a marathon, you definitely need a little bit more to eat. If you're mostly sedentary throughout the day, then you should be able to recognize that you're not quite as hungry as the days when you maybe exercise quite a bit. So that's just one piece to mindful eating, is recognizing when you're hungry and when you're full. And it does play a big role also with the exercise as well. Another thing here is that tracking our calories on our wearables, our watches, our devices like our bikes or treadmills, it's accurate, like we said, to a certain extent, but it also sometimes is not super helpful. So let's say it is accurate just for the sake, and it tells you that you burn 500 calories in an hour. Well, what is that really going to do for me, right? I prefer actually to not look at those numbers on the treadmill or the watch, and to know, okay, I did something good for me today, like my mindset's better. I feel a little bit less stressed. I feel it's better for my well-being. So just the fact that you're maybe getting outside or doing a little bit of exercise is good for us in a lot of ways. And we don't necessarily need to focus on those calories exactly. Another piece to this, which I'll sound like a broken record here because dietitians always like to talk about, eat your fruits and vegetables, your whole grains, your lean proteins, and your healthy fats. And you will never fail if you focus on those things. And I'm sure you've heard us talk about them before. And if you haven't, you'll hear us talk about them again. But if you're eating healthy foods most of the time, we talk about the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time you're eating healthy foods. That should be a good start right there. Try for 5 fruits and vegetables in a day. That should be a good start right there as well. And then lastly, what I'll say about this is focusing on something called volumetrics. So volumetrics is a form of focusing on calories without really focusing on calories. And you can think about it like this, and it is like calorie density like you see on the slide here. So if you think about eating an apple, how many apples could you really eat before you feel very full, right? Maybe 1, maybe 2, sometimes maybe 3. That would be like max capacity for me. I don't even think I could eat 1.5 apples. But you'll feel very full because there's a large volume there with very few calories, and you're getting a lot of nutrients. So it would be high in nutrient density, low in calorie density, right? Let's say, for example, we talked about a bag of chips. A bag of chips, you could sit there and eat 2, 3 bags of chips, depending how long. You could eat more than that, right? You could endlessly eat chips without feeling full, and they're very high in calories. So that would be a high calorie density, low nutrient density food. Now, don't get confused, because there are foods that are in the middle where they're high calorie density and high nutrient density, like nuts, for example. And those things we just want to have in moderation. They're very healthy for us, but we don't want to eat the whole bag because they are very high in calories. So thinking about things like that, it also goes back to the mindful eating topic, where if I eat an apple with a small handful of nuts, I'll be full and I'll have the nutrients that I need, but I won't have to focus on the calories at all. So it's those combinations, and we can talk more about that in a one-on-one session too, to talk about like healthy snacks and meals and things like that. But that's also something to consider.
Awesome, Allison. Yeah, so just to kind of summarize, should you only focus on calories? No, it's important, but there are other things that you should be focusing on as well, like the mindful eating if you're hungry or full, and then also what's exactly on your plate, like Allison mentioned. So also to summarize some of the other questions that we talked about, do wearables accurately measure calories burned? Short answer, no, but they can still be useful to try to hit your same goal each day. And then how to estimate my energy or calorie needs. There's a bunch of calculators out there that can do it, or come to one of us and we can schedule a nutrition consultation. And just before we move on, there was one question from Nikita: how much is Smart Scale reliable for tracking body fat, and so on. Just to mention, those aren't honestly the most accurate. I would say they can give you, if you're weighing yourself under the same conditions each day at the same time, it can kind of give you trends of numbers. But I don't know, Allison, Tess, if there's anything you want to add on that.
I'd say the same, Carly.
Yeah, there. If you compared it to maybe a gold standard of that, which might be hydrodensometry, it's not as accurate. But truly, if you're trying to watch a trend in your own body fat, they can be helpful in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. And another question from Mohammed: does small multiple meals make any difference? Or let's say just one good meal a day is good. And Tess and Allison, you can jump in on this one if you want, but I would say it really sort of depends on the person. We try to say have at least like 2 to 3 meals per day. But it really depends.
I think what we need to think about there is that protein is something that we need to have space throughout our day. There are plenty of studies that back that up. So if you're eating all of your protein at once in the middle of the day, you're not going to be using that protein very efficiently. So I do not agree with one meal per day. That doesn't mean I think a person needs to eat 6 meals a day. We don't know that. I think it depends on, some people like to eat a smaller amount, but I think if we're doing 2 or 3 meals, 3 meals is really, I think, the optimal way to go.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And so, let's see, for this week, we do have some challenges for you guys and to come back the next session and share with us. But the first one is try tracking your food one weekday and then one weekend day until the next session and see if you notice a big difference. You might be surprised, or maybe it isn't different at all, but it's good to kind of test it out. And then second one, hit your movement goal of choice on your wearable tracker. So maybe not focusing on the calories burned so much, but more of just hitting that same target and being consistent each day. And then our third one, meet with your dietitian to estimate your calorie needs, which we talked about. And let's see, do we have any other questions?
We do have one last question.
Okay.
So this one is, when cutting out refined sugar, this person tends to crave and consume more breads and dairy. Should I worry about getting addicted to? That's a pretty big topic in and of itself. So that would be one where I would be looking into somebody's protein intake. Are they getting adequate protein? What are you replacing these sugary foods with? So that would be a greatly discussed in a one-on-one.
Yeah, that can definitely be discussed on one-on-one. That way we can dive a little bit deeper. And Cynthia, let's see, how do you set your movement goals? Sorry, I was late, so you might have already answered this one. Yeah, for this one, I mean, it also depends on the person. You want to set a goal that is realistic and you can fit it in your day. So if you can only fit in like 20 minutes of walking, then make that your goal and do that for maybe a couple weeks. And then you can always make your goal a little bit bigger each time. But it's just whatever you think you can do consistently.
Yeah. So, and the final question is, in tracking your progress, do the scales work or do a body caliper? I think it goes back into what Carly said earlier. One thing I know is that you've got to know how to use those calipers pretty well. So, you can really get things off if somebody doesn't really know how to accurately use those. So it goes back to kind of what Carly was saying before, in that maybe it's not as accurate in terms of your exact body fat percentage, but they can be helpful in terms of kind of overall trends. You might see blips because of water, but overall you should see a trend.
Yeah.
So they can be useful for that.
Yep. And awesome. So yeah, guys, not next week, in 2 weeks.
When is it?
Yeah, on February 12th, a Friday, at noon, we'll have our next session. It'll be a good one. So our topic is our topic is I messed up my January goals. Now, what do I do? So we'll be going into that. It'll be a good one. Hope you guys can make it. And I just want to say thanks for all the questions and for participating. I think we're getting some more questions, but I don't know if we have too much time. Definitely, if you have some questions, just email us and we can set up a one-on-one session. Because I think we are a little bit short on time, but I just wanted to say thanks everyone for joining, and it was a good session.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
guys, have a really great weekend. Bye, guys.